All right, posing. So we're going to talk about, like I said, posing, but specifically how to build it, what to look for, and why, really. Now, the why of all our posing, it all starts not from necessarily a technical understanding of a computer or Maya. It comes from, again, knowing our character, right? So when we think about constructing our poses, we first need to understand the purpose of the pose, the who, the what, why, when, all that stuff. We need to know who our characters are. And if we don't know them, then the audience isn't either. All right. So again, that's where it all comes from. So just keep that in mind as we talk, because this is going to be a little bit more technically, artistically kind of driven today. But all of these pointers about good, appealing poses comes from these first questions. Okay. When we're coming up with our poses, right? What are we trying to say? We want our poses to be emotional. We want our poses to be intentional, and we want them to be simple, right? And these little quotes, blurbs, come from The Illusion of Life. And for the emotional, right, it's good to remember too much action spoils acting. This goes back, to the basic principles of, if something's movement attracts attention. So if something's moving, there's no point in doing any action, subtle or elaborate, if we're going to miss it. It doesn't mean that we never move a character. It's just, again, how we move it, the personality. And then Charlie Chaplin said, little as I knew about movies, I knew nothing transcended personality, character, right? The character needs to come through in the pose. The character needs to come through in the motion. The character needs to come through in the action, right? The personality needs to come through. And then we want our poses to be intentional, right? Mushy action makes a mushy statement. And again, this goes back to, we need to know who our characters are, right? We need to know, again, who they are. So then that statement that we make, that motion, that action, that pose that we're trying to feel in our character, it's not mushy. It makes a statement. We get it. We connect with it, right? And then again, say something, be brave, like make it bold. Now, bold, not in the sense of the same terms of, life altering, changing, but just clear, bold, brave. Make sure it says something and it's not mushy, right? That's the thing. And it goes to simple, where again, it's just clarity, right? Simple, clarity, those words kind of not interchangeable, but that's the whole essence of it. Are you trying to say too much in a scene? Nothing comes off strong because the character is all over the place. Don't confuse them. I learned this lesson on one of my shots in Ice Age, where it was a great shot in regards to opportunity. I thought I could have a lot of fun with animation, right? With bending and twisting and breaking of joints and, exaggerating and all that stuff. But what I neglected to do better was I didn't say anything real clearly because my character was all over the place, and directing the audience, whether it was an internal thing that was more important or an external thing, there was so much movement, we just missed it. I misunderstood the term exaggeration. Exaggeration doesn't mean crazy over the top, right? At least that's not what it's intended to mean. Exaggerations just mean if they're sad, exaggerate the sad so we feel it. If they're happy, exaggerate the happy so we feel it. Again, the audience, we want to connect and make it clear. So it's the things that they're supposed to feel, just push it further. And again, push doesn't mean wild, crazy. It just means push it so it's more clear. And I misunderstood that. I went crazy, zany, Ren and Stimpy style ridiculousness on a shot that didn't really need it. So in building good poses, maybe you've heard of this, maybe not, tilt, rhythm, and twist. Understanding the power of these three words help our poses be more dynamic and interesting. These words come from, all this stuff is coming from legends in animation that have done it 40 plus years or the whole life or whatever. And I'm still getting better and trying to understand and study these more. But this is, when I'm looking at your poses, I'm trying to see it. I'm trying to help you see it. So tilt, right? And again, a lot of this you probably heard in different forms or another, contrapposto, stuff like that. Tilt is really useful to loosen up a stiff pose, right? Over here we can see this girl, this sculpture, just as this is a sculpture, right? But if we look at the two different poses here, which one is more interesting? Not just from a pose standpoint, right? I'm not talking emotion, just purely from a pose. They kind of have the same emotion in the sense of just like looking off in the distance, but at the same time, flat to camera, very symmetrical, not interesting. And right, same almost emotion, but just adding a little bit of tilt. Again, you can see here, just tilting the head up a little bit, tilting the head sideways, opposite of the shoulders, adding these tilts into these poses just adds so much more interest into the pose itself, right? Getting away from building our poses to camera, straight to camera. It's not like that's a bad thing, like never, ever, never do it. But just understand when we do it, it needs to feel intentional. Why did we come to camera? Did we need the character to really connect at that moment? But how can we still break it up so it's not completely mirrored, completely symmetrical? But again, just already adding a little bit of tilt, loosens it up, adds some appeal, gives more visual interest to the pose itself, okay? Rhythm is the overall movement of the pose, okay? So using the lines in the body to lead and direct the eye to the area we intend to focus. So this is the overall movement, right? And we're not trying to think about, we're really just trying to think about the overall feeling, right, that we're trying to achieve. Less about the individual body parts. So it's not so much, look at Jane's hand here, right? It's just a block, right? It's not about the mechanics of it all yet. It's just that feeling. Once we get that feeling in working, then we can go back and work in what we know about hand poses and eye direction and all that stuff. Is that feeling, the overall movement and rhythm of the pose. And then twist, right? Instead of posing our character directly to camera, we can add texture to the pose by aiming different parts of the body different directions. Help give form to our flat poses. And it also helps give movement, and it can exaggerate the intent of a pose. So already, again, like we looked at with tilt, just that to camera posing, this gives movement, right? These proportions of the body are turning and twisting, giving much more interest and appeal to the pose. And again, the intent of this pose, right? Focused here, everything is kind of supporting this line of action. All falls within this line of action thing we've heard about. This tilt, rhythm, and twist falls within the contrapposta stuff. But again, as I'm looking at your poses, I'm thinking, how can we turn the head a little more, tilt? How can we find these great juxtapose angles that, again, add interest and, again, appeal to our poses, right?